Hey everyone, welcome to the KE Report and another daily editorial on Tuesday, June 10th, chatting with Dave Erfle, founder and editor of the Junior Miner Junky. And Dave, look, money continues to filter down the food chain in the precious metals. Gold continues to be relatively flat, right around 33.50, but silver has had a breakout. We were talking last week about silver stocks leading, juniors joining the party, and now silver is broken above that $35 level. We saw some strong action in the silver stocks really over the last, I don't know, week or so, I guess. I've noticed a lot more interest in some of the silver stocks. That being said, a lot of them are also coming off of some almost low levels, not necessarily 52-week lows, but some that really hadn't done anything for years. Now we're seeing some life in these stocks. Dave, I know you have some silver stocks. They're obviously doing well. What's your take on this breakout in silver and the action in the silver stocks?
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about it, I think, for the past several weeks. The silver stocks were telling us that, hey, silver's about to break out. So it's really not a surprise to myself or my subscribers. I've been, basically telling them that, basically we had that brief spike low below key support at $30, right? Back in April, it was associated with the stock market mini panic. And that got a lot of people out of position, right? I mean, silver and gold both, they love to have these false moves in both directions, be getting ready for the big move in the opposite direction. And what it does, it just creates the energy for that breakout. And that's exactly what happened. We had that false move. Silver went right back up to that 3250, 3250 area, which was previously strong support. And it coiled there for several weeks. And we had that gold silver ratio pop over 100, which is extremely rare. And it screams, hey, take a look at me. I'm silver. I'm cheap. Buy me. And the stocks were saying the same thing. And not only that, but major miners were saying the same thing because they were picking up these primary silver assets, these single producing primary silver assets for growth because they saw what was on the horizon. They see the gold price, breaking out of that 13-year cup and handle pattern, rising from $2,100 to $3,500, and they know that that silver's next. It's only a matter of time. So we better get positioned before it happens. And that's what was happening, and that's what I did. That's what my subscribers did, and hopefully that's what your listeners did when we were talking about this for the past 2 weeks. So it's really not surprising, Corey.
Well, Dave, I want to just look at the last couple trading sessions, especially the end of last week. There's no doubt that last week on Monday we had a big move, and then there was a lot of front running of the price action in silver on Wednesday into Thursday. And so you saw some really good action in the silver stocks, but Friday was really disappointing. Silver got up not just over 35, but got up over 36, closed the week at 36.13. And you would think, wow, that's an amazing close of the week. And on Friday, SIL was down, SILJ was down, and almost all the silver stocks were down. There's a few exceptions, but most of them were down 1 to 5% on a day where silver was breaking out and well in the green. And you would have thought we would have seen a leverage to that move. So I was curious how it would open up yesterday. Yesterday, silver's up, tagged 37.03, closed in the high 36s, 36.80 and some change. And yet the SILJ got up over a percent, SIL got up over a percent, and you saw some stocks, get a nice bump, but that's coming off of a crappy Friday and a lackluster Monday. Do you think that people just aren't really hitting the accelerator now because that move was already priced in to break out, or are people not believing that this price is going to stick?
No, I think it's the former. Like I just said, we had these huge moves precede the silver breakout. So the silver breakout was the confirmation of basically what the mining stocks were already telling you. You take a look at the daily action of both SIL and especially SILJ. They became extremely overbought in the short term, and they have these two huge upside gaps. So they're just consolidating those moves right now, while the silver price is consolidating now above 35. It's like you said, it briefly ran up and it touched 37, and now it's consolidating a bit, and it looks like I would expect that $35 marginal line for so long, for 13 years, it's finally being crossed. and now I expect it's gonna become strong support. But the tell will be how long silver stays above $36. Because silver is, you don't have to tell you, it's extremely volatile. And if the shorts continue, if the silver price continues to stay above $36 here for the next few days, the shorts are going to get even more nervous, and you're going to have more short covering. And I know that $40 level is the next target. I mean, the last time silver broke out above was above $35 was broke out above 35 was back in 2011, and it took only 6 weeks to reach $50. Now, granted, that was a blow off top. I don't see this as being a blow off top. This is a move from a cumulative base. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens at the end of the quarter, because we got the end of the quarter coming up here in about 3 weeks. And silver has never closed above 37.50 on a quarterly basis. So if we have a quarterly close above 37.50, $38, that's really going to get momentum players, hedge funds excited in this really tiny silver market. And we could move to $50 a lot quicker than most are expecting.
Look at the volume too in SIL and SILJ this year, on top of last year when we started to see a lot more volume coming in. This year we have seen huge volume. So that's, I think, also a very good sign. But Dave, let's just simplify this then. The stocks were telling us that silver was going to move. Silver has moved. Gold has been kind of stuck. We've seen money filter from the gold stocks into the silver stocks and into the smaller gold stocks. What comes next? What do we need to see here that just further confirms that we have another leg higher? What do you think happens first?
Well, I think you're going to see a bit more consolidation here, but it's really difficult to basically dust off a crystal ball and project what's going to happen next, especially in the silver market. I mean, you could have, we have inflation numbers coming out tomorrow, and the market could look at those inflation numbers and say, look, wow, inflation is calming down a bit, and the Fed is probably going to so the Fed's probably going to lower rates. So, that would hurt the dollar, of course. And the dollar, it's below that. It's strong, formerly strong support area of 100, the dollar index, and now it's coiling below there for possibly another move lower. That's what the gold price is sniffing out, and that's especially what the silver price is sniffing out. But if it goes the opposite direction as far as the inflation statistics are concerned, the market could basically whack silver back down to 35 pretty quickly. So all I know is it's very bullish here, with a weekly close above $35. We hadn't had that in 13 years, and we've had the supply deficit for the past 5 years in silver. They're not mining as much as of silver. They're using more. It's more of an industrial metal, sure, but it's required more. So everything's bullish for the silver price, and everything's bullish for the silver market. And the stocks are telling you that it's silver's time, because in the past, we've had these moves back. We've had these moves up to $35, and one of them was a false move because the silver stackers got together and were able to force the price back up towards 35. But that was just a signal to short it again. And the way the silver stocks were reacting to that move were telling you it wasn't going to last. But the stocks this time are telling you that this is the move. This is it. So it basically, for me, it's like, how much FOMO can people sitting on the sidelines that missed the move handle? Because I'm telling you, a lot of people missed this move because of that false breakdown that I told you about earlier. That whipsawed them out of position, and they know not to chase this sector or this market. So they're waiting on the sidelines. How much FOMO can they handle when they're seeing these silver stocks take off? So, even though a lot of these stocks are due for some consolidation and a little bit of profit taking, I don't think it's going to last that long, because I think there's a lot on the sidelines waiting to get into this sector.
Well, Dave, I just want to even look back in time and compare what's happening now to what happened during the silver squeeze moment. When we saw 2020 coming out of the pandemic, I'm just going to look at SILJ for people's focus. SILJ got up to 1721 during that big peak in 2020, but then it continued to that silver squeeze in early 2021. Silver got to $30 at that point, and the SILJ got up to 1884. We're nowhere even close to that peak right now, and we're at 36, almost $37. And again, on last week on Thursday, SILJ hit 1553. That's a nice move. It was a little bit higher peak, still nowhere close to the silver squeeze moment. But then it was at 1498 on Friday. As we talk today, it's down at 1487. So this thing is actually pulling down as silver is going up. Isn't that concerning that we're nowhere close to those? Shouldn't we be at $20 on the SILJ?
I don't think it's concerning. I think it's very bullish, and especially as Corey pointed out, the volume. That volume spike we saw in SILJ was a record volume spike. It's never even come close to that high of volume in the SILJ. So I think it's bullish, and it shows that hey, these silver stocks are still massively undervalued. As the market now, I think is gonna begin to price in a floor at $35 as opposed to this over decade long ceiling that $35 was. Just like the gold market right now is in the process of pricing in a $3,000 floor.
So, Dave, what silver stocks do you think will benefit from this just generally positive environment? Can people just go out and buy any silver stock and, quite frankly, let the rising tide lift all boats?
No, I'm still of the ilk that there's very few quality silver stocks out there. And fortunately, myself and my subscribers have accumulated several of them because they performed very, very well. I mean, there's a couple of them that are close to tripling, and I have sell alerts on a third of our position to get our initial investment out and hold the rest for an eventual buyout. We would just hope that that these stocks don't get bought out too soon because they're de-risking quality silver projects. You look at juniors that are de-risking large quality silver projects, and there's not that many of them. And you can tell which ones they are just by looking at their charts. But there are several that have yet to catch up that are in the earlier stages. And we talked about this before, that that investors are now looking down the food chain into earlier stage companies, earlier stage juniors that are de-risking at the PEA stage. They already have a solid resource, and they're building on that resource, and they've either just released a PEA or they're about to. So that's where the value lies right now, because like I said, a lot of these companies have already moved quite a bit. So if you're looking for value in the silver space and in the gold space, you need to move a little farther down the food chain. And but with that comes higher risk.
Dave, is there a rule of thumb that you like to see as far as the percentage of silver metal in a development project or in a producer's when their production profile of metals? Because there's a lot of silver stocks parading as a silver stock and drag, but really they're base metal stocks or gold stocks. So do you have kind of a line in the sand that you like to see a certain percentage of silver?
Yeah, I mean, it's best to have a primary silver project, absolutely. But if you take a look at something like SK Creek, that's going to be, a very high grade gold mine. It's already fully financed. They're just waiting for a permit. But if you take a look at the byproduct of silver that they're going to be producing in years 1 through 5 of that mine, it's expected to produce 9.5 million ounces of silver, and that's just as high, about higher than a lot of these global primary silver mines. So it all depends on the project.
Yeah, it always all depends on the project and always the management team behind it too. But any interest now in any exploration stocks, Dave? A lot of these are still very small market caps, and we have seen some move on drill results. Good drill results are really moving stocks, and a lot of these companies do have money to drill. So are you getting sucked into any of the junior explorers?
No, not yet. I mean, I like the companies that are, like I said, that right in this environment that I'm not in yet, that have already, they proved up this fantastic resource, but they're in the process of de-risking it and proving up proof of concept, making it bigger. And if they have positive drill results on top of a resource that they've already issued, I like that. But earlier stage companies without a resource, I'm still not willing to go down there yet because there's too much value in these companies that have already made these major discoveries and already put out a nice resource. and either they've just issued a PEA or they're about to.
Dave, we're in that weird environment where there's a lot of good news getting rewarded finally. So it's not weird, it's the way it should be, but we're in that environment where we're in a bull market. A lot of people in a bull market expect to buy pullbacks, and those pullbacks are always more shallow and more brief than people are expecting. So there's a lot of people waiting to get into position, but there's also the temptation to sell too early. So if we do see a run into the 40s and then eventually that $50 all-time high from 1980 and 2011, are people that are selling today, because clearly they're selling in silver stocks today and that we're selling on Friday, are they selling too soon?
Well, it all depends on, on the situation. I learned I learned a long time ago, if you don't have a selling strategy, you're going to leave a lot of that money on the table, when this sector turns. So you have to have a selling strategy, right? You have to have a risk management selling strategy, a proven one that I've been able to do that because I've been in this sector so long. I've made all the mistakes and learned from them. So I have a really successful selling strategy. And it's key because anybody can buy a cheap junior, right? I mean, that's not the tough part. The tough part is once you bought that cheap junior, what is your goal for the company to do, and what is the share price that you're gonna eventually take at least your investment capital out, because once you've taken your investment capital out of that stock, it's a lot easier to hold it for the long term. And it's just you have to figure that out, not not just before you do it. I mean, while the story is playing out, that's going to change, because once you got into a stock, the story could change on what they find or what they don't find, and then your target for the share price changes. Plus, you have to factor in the dilution, the warrants they've had to issue, and hopefully they haven't had to issue too many. There's a lot of things that come into play, but a selling strategy is definitely needed here, because like I said, it's easy to buy a stock, but it's a lot more difficult to judge when to sell it.
Yeah, we've all been there, Dave. I think we've all rode those stocks that have gone up and then all of a sudden just rolled back over, and we just watch them move back down. But again, market timing is so important. And right now, this is very much bull market action. So pay attention to the stocks you're in. Also pay attention to what we're seeing in the markets, what the market is telling us, because right now it's still a very strong market. But yeah, interesting to see some of the silver stocks, I guess, not taking off the way we would expect after this breakout. Either way, we'll touch base with you next week, Dave. And hey, it's been another pretty strong start to this week for precious metals. Again, Dave Erfle, founder and editor of the Junior Miner Junky. Dave, thanks for your time today.
Thank you, guys.